put together a version of this presentation that has my audio with the source audio from my laptop for the examples. So and that'll be up on my webpage, markblevis.com, maybe today, more likely in the next few days. Last year, Bruce Murray did a presentation on editing, and he made fun of me in a loving way about how much time and effort I put into editing. And as a result, I started to do a series on editing on my blog because I had received a lot of questions after his presentation. So most of what I'm actually going to, because I'm especially short on time now, I'm going to show you what I do. And there's a whole thing called Blevis-ian, or Blevis-ian, Blevis-ian editing on my blog. And it describes a little bit more about each of these edit styles that I do. I'm going to start off with a clean edit, and a clean edit, obviously, for obvious reasons, is just a straight splice, and you move two pieces together. So in traditional days of radio and audio tape, you took your reel, you'd spread out the reel, you'd line up your tape on a splicing block, you'd find the spot where you want to do it. Actually, you find the spot first and mark it. You put it in the splicing block, you do a cut, put two pieces together and tape it. That essentially is a clean edit. Digital affords a lot more opportunities to do interesting edits, and this is what I'm going to show you. Now, first thing that you need to know when you do an edit is you have a waveform, as you see here, and I'm expanding it, and the more you expand it, the more detail you see. And one of the really important things to remember when you do an edit, in order to prevent digital clicking, is find the 0 point. The 0 point is basically where the waveform intersects with your zero line, which is right here, this horizontal straight line. If you're going to do a cut in the middle of the waveform, it's a little bit more fussy, and depending on which software package you use, it really doesn't matter what software package you use, actually. I use Cubase, Audacity, all these things operate in the same principles. And I'm not going to show you specifics about Cubase, I'm going to show you specifics about editing. And then there's a lot of times where you might actually have dead space between waveforms, like here, and there's a large space, you can do the cut almost anywhere. So in the case of a clean edit here, I wanted to remove a piece of this, this interview, just for two reasons. One of them was to clean it up a little bit, and the other was to shorten it up, because I constrict myself to 10 minutes. In order to cut out, be down to 10 minutes, sometimes I have to cut out 3 or 4 words in one spot. I know it's really anal, but it's something that I do. So this is the source, just a clip from the source of what will be a clean edit.
Because we operate that way anyway, it makes sense to do it that way, but the reason we like to do it...
So Stephen, my guest here, was kind of meandering his thoughts and still kind of putting his thoughts together. So what I did is I tightened it up.
Because we operate that way anyway, the reason we like to do it as a marketer, or perhaps as a leader within an organization...
So I just cut out a few words, and you can see this is the beginning. What have we got here? So that's where I essentially cut out this piece right here. So I just cut out a few words. What is really important, though, when I did the cut, is you'll see right here, that's a breath. And a lot of people will cut the breath out. If you leave the breath in, it sounds like natural speech. It's very disguised. You would never know by hearing this.
Operate that way anyway. The reason we...
You would never know that there was a piece missing from it. So that's a clean edit, pretty obvious and pretty standard. Digital allows us to, now I multitrack. You can see here I have these 2 tracks here represent 2 lapel mics. So you can see I'm wearing a lapel mic. And when I record just one more book, a podcast that we record in a bookstore, about books, in a coffee shop, my wife and I both wear lapel mics. And so we end up with 2 channels, left and right. And usually I don't do a whole lot of editing in the show, but on the odd occasion we might meander to find a spot that we want to remove. So what you end up here is you don't do a straight splice, because the background noise is a problem. It may not be obvious to a lot of people, but when you have background noise like a coffee shop, it may always sound like dishes clanking and ambient noise. But if you take even a few seconds and cut that few seconds out and try to line it up, there's going to be a difference in the ambient noise. Maybe somebody walked past you and it changed the acoustics of the space you're sitting in. And that it'll become amazingly obvious once you do that cut. So what you have to do in these particular cases is blend the two. You have to mix them. You have to cross-fade. And it really disguises it, and you really don't hear what happened. So in this particular case, I think just to keep things tight again for shortness, and also I think we had mentioned this particular spot elsewhere in the show. We decided to remove this piece of audio. We had this. And his cello, where he had been sitting, which is leaning up on the chair, is blown up by a rocket. And
so the thing is, instead of the truck coming every Wednesday now, it was him playing out at the square every Wednesday.
So the enemy is taking away this sense of community. So you can also hear there's music in the background, there's a coffee machine, there's all sorts of things going on. We decided that because there was a mention, what Andrea, my wife, had said there was mentioned elsewhere on the show, we decided, well, let's just remove that because it's redundant. And this is what we ended up with. And his cello, where he had been sitting, which is leaning up on the chair, is blown up by a rocket. So the enemy is taking away this. You would never know that that had been removed. And the trick here is you'll, and the nice thing about Cubase is the way it shows us, you'll see there are these angled lines here. Those represent fade-outs, and these represent fade-ins. It takes a little bit of playing to get the crossfades right. What I've found most often works is you do the fade-out. Now here actually, for some reason or another, maybe things shifted when I was using my trackpad. That the fade-in occurs just before the fade-out starts. Usually what I find works is a crossfade where the fade-out happens and fade-in, they both start at the same spot, but the fade-in occurs within the first third of the fade-out. So you end up with 2/3 of the fade-out where the full-on audio is already there. Yeah?
How long is the seconds of those seconds?
It really depends. This one here is really tight. You can see that this whole fade-out and fade-in occurs in like half a second. I've had some fade-out. It really depends on the audio. It depends on how much space you have to work in. When you're dealing with ambient noise, like the coffee shop here, I'm amazed that I was able to do that in half a second. Usually, you probably have to have about a second worth of fading because there's music issues, there's the coffee machine, and I think what might have happened here is I had to do it tightly with the coffee machine. So the coffee machine comes in right away. So that's a blended edit, and you can see here, in this particular case, because there's two tracks of source audio, you end up with 4 tracks of audio to make this all happen. The more tracks of audio you work with, the more complicated it becomes, unfortunately. The next one is the buried edit. And the buried edit is one where you actually you splice mid-word. So you're actually splicing on a sound. So where this is coming in particular handy is when somebody goes, and, or they go, so, this is what I did. So you find that people hang on to certain consonant sounds, sometimes vowel sounds, but more often than not consonant sounds. In this particular case, my wife is still collecting her thoughts on our show, and you'll hear long.
And yet the pictures are so dramatic, like.
She's like trying to figure out what she wanted to say because the pictures were dramatic. But to listen to that would be a bit much. And this is what it becomes when you do the splice in the S.
And yet the pictures are so dramatic, like. So
you would never know. Again, it's just it's buried in there. And again, the trick becomes, and I'm sure I did it this way. Maybe I got lucky. I'm pretty sure I did this on a 0. Oh no, actually I cheated. It didn't quite go on the 0. But when you're splicing sounds, you want to make sure that you're on the 0 or pretty close to the 0. I got lucky there. The sound lined up anyways. Lined it up. And the final one. And this is what I actually just blogged about this week. This one you have to be very careful of. This is called the Staggered edit. In the Staggered edit, again, I'm dealing with 2 audio tracks. In this particular case, I'm interviewing Barbara Reed, who is she's an illustrator and author of children's books, and she works with Plasticine. And I was trying to get my thought together in this interview question, and I stumbled, and I was losing my thought. And I needed to be bailed out. And then there was a long pause from the time I actually stopped to the time she started because she was a little bit unsure of what I said. So what I did is I did a staggered edit. So you can see here the space between when I stop and Barbara begins. And then on this track, you'll notice that she starts while I'm still talking. And I did that to save my ass. But what I end up doing in the process is it's natural conversation done properly. but I'm also making my guest interrupt me. And so what I did is I did exactly that. I was going nowhere. I picked a spot up until where I thought enough of it had been communicated that the idea was driven home. And I cut out a section here. And then I eliminated space and made it sound like she bailed me out by having her interrupt me. So this is the source. And this is embarrassing.
How do you capture emotion? Is there something that you're seeing that the rest of us don't see? Or is it, I don't know. I don't even know how to ask the question. How do you capture emotion?
So I was caught off guard, didn't know what I was going with, and then there's a long pause before she starts, and the pause goes.
Emotion.
I think that's the...
Now pauses are usually good, but in this particular case I wanted to save myself.
How do you capture emotion? Is there something that you're seeing that the rest of us don't see? Or is
I think that's the most important thing. It's taking me a while.
I probably could have played with the actual placement of where she started, but there's enough of it there that I recognized that she was starting to talk, so I stopped, and it worked out nicely. That the way my or happened, it sounded like I was saved. So there's no point in me talking anymore. So that's visually what those edits look like, and what the results sound like. Editing. A lot of people complain about editing and the process and the difficulty. Yeah, it can take a long time. Editing done well can make a good show an amazing show. And I've learned from all the editing that I've done just how incredible documentaries are. When you watch a movie or listen to an audio documentary, an audio play, you just don't know how much goes on in the background. Ninja was telling us on the Canadian Podcast Buffet this week how she will edit down, is it 4 hours of audio or is it 4 hours of editing time?
About 4 hours of editing time.
So 4 hours of editing time for a 30-minute show, pardon me. Yeah, so you can, depending on how much source audio you're working with, I made a 30-minute documentary from 9 minutes, that would have been amazing, from 9 hours of audio. And that probably, usually where I ballpark there is probably about 3 times the source audio for editing. Did you have a question or no, yours? Okay. The one trick that I will show you, and I don't know enough about some of the audio programs that I deal with, that people deal with, is, and this is a really nice feature of Cubase, is when you do the edit, you don't actually have to cut and line up. I can just do a cut. I can grab my source and just slide it over. So that it takes a lot less time to do that than. Oops. Second. I'm not used to working with a trackpad. Cut. 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 Delete. Slide over. I mean, so it just takes a little bit less time. Yeah?
Right. So for us non-Mac types, is Cubase something that comes with the Mac as part of the broadband?
Cubase is probably not something most people will use. It's actually available for PC and Mac. It's a multi. Yeah, that's the thing. It's meant for. It's actually multi-track recording meant for musicians, and I happen to be a musician, so I own it. And so it's a tool that's incredibly overkill for podcasting. Brand new, it's about $800. I bought it years ago, and I just pay the upgrades, which are marginal, incremental costs.
Can you do the same things with Audition? Like, is that the same kind of techniques that you look for?
All these software packages function very similarly. I mean, there's Audition, there's I guess there's Audacity, there's another high-end program. Mackie has a multi-track editing program. There's GarageBand. All of these things function on the same principles. It's how they execute it.
I found with Audacity, if you want to move stuff around Multitrack, which I don't know if you know, if you want to move chunks of audio, you can copy a section of complete silence, like a track of just silence, put it in another track, copy, paste that silence in, and you will bump something forward. If you wanted to add more of a gap to a thing, but you didn't want to put a whole silence in and silence all other tracks, that's a really good technique if you just want to, I need 30 seconds more of a gap between this soundbite, this soundbite, but I have 30 seconds blank here, but I don't have to add 30 seconds and 30 seconds every track, just that one track. Copy and paste is your friend. That's one thing I've learned in sound.
There are a couple things that I'll bring up, and this comes up often rather. And I talked about breath earlier. Breath will save you, especially if you're going to cut out an entire line of speech from one of your guests or from yourself, because the breath gives you that permission to have a change in dynamic. Because people will, it's a little bit odd when somebody takes a breath and then their speaking is still low, because the most powerful part of your sentence or anything that you say is always the stuff that immediately follows your breath, because you have that much more air coming in. So leave those spaces, as Todd Maffin once said, let your interviews breathe, or let your speaking breathe. So when you do your interviews or you do your editing of your own speaking, don't cut out all the dead air, because it's going to. I actually found there was one time I was listening to a podcast, and after a few minutes I was out of breath, and I thought, I'm not walking any faster than usual, but it was sympathetic. The guest never took a breath in about 5 minutes. And while I was listening to this, because the guest wasn't breathing, I never had an opportunity to breathe while I was listening, and I just realized I was like gasping for air. So yeah, you want otherwise you won't have very many listeners if they're falling down on the sidewalk. Any other questions? Oh yeah?
If you're cutting a piece and you want to end, someone keeps going but you want to stop them before, is there any way to get the last sound to come down as you normally would in the end of a sentence?
There's probably some tricks that you could use.
Because I find that problem, like when someone keeps going and they become really redundant, you want to stop them, but
Staggered edit is probably your best shot there. Is cut them off. It's artificial.
But then their voice is still up.
Yeah, but when you interrupt somebody, they don't usually have the option to come down. Like when I'll play that Staggered edit again here. I'm still up here when Barbara Reed. And you know what I can do is I'm going to slide her over a little bit more.
We're seeing that the rest of us don't see, or is
I
it?
think that's the most important thing.
See, I wouldn't have to come down there because I recognize that she's cut me off, or she's cut me off. Pardon me, Barbara. Sorry. That she's starting to talk, and there's no need for me to continue.
I also found that sometimes you want to hide the background. So what you can do is you have an atmosphere track, and you can run that, in the background. That'll cover a lot of holes.
That's a fantastic idea, and I've never used it myself. I know people who do use it, but when you pick an atmosphere track, pick something that people can listen to. I've heard podcasts where people have music, like a loop. Pardon me, Bruce. Bruce from Zedcast sometimes has this little guitar lick thing going on in the background. There's some other podcasts where they had the same loop. Sometimes it might be tight, it might be 16 bars, sometimes it might be 24, 36 bars. But the point is, it keeps looping. And after 5 minutes, I can't handle it anymore. So if you pick, like one of the nice things, and actually there was a time, can I tell the story about so when we first started doing Just One More Book, we recorded Just One More Book by putting this little unit on the table at a coffee shop between us. And it did an amazingly good job. And on quiet mornings, it sounded great. And on busy mornings, people who have ADD were going nuts. And Whitney from the LD podcast sent us an email saying, I can't handle the background noise, it's distracting, I can't get there. So that's why we end up going with the lav mics. But we were debating, what were we going to do if this was a real problem? And I said, well, I can sit in the coffee shop one day and put the recorder on the table and record for 15 or 20 minutes or half an hour. And just have a section of audio that we could use, and then I could just borrow from different places so it didn't always sound like the exact same background track. And a coffee shop atmosphere is a little bit more, and you can set the level, and you can, so you can adjust how noisy it is or how much of it is present, and then you still have that atmosphere. Now, you're not in the room at the time, so you don't have, it's like recording a live band versus multi-tracking a band. You'll always have a more interesting performance when you have the whole band there in that situation because you're capturing the energy. So we were worried. We didn't really want to go that way. Unfortunately, I think the lapel mics are working for us.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's just one of those things. Sometimes it's like the Clinton silverware. It's like my husband putting away the dishes while everybody's still asleep. I mean, to me, that just wakes me up.
Yeah.
So it was just that, on a particular.
That's why I drop the knife on the table sometimes for you.
I know,
Whitney,
that makes
you
me
there?
feel like a home, yeah.
So something like that. In fact, one of the situations we ran into recently is we frequently ask them to turn the music down at the coffee shop, so that it's not too noisy, and because we don't want the music to be too loud. Anyways, they turn the music off, and what we realized when we listened to the recording afterwards is, wow, really, doesn't sound all that juicy. So I said, well, you know what, maybe I'll grab some Uncle Seth tunes and stuff like that, and I'll put them through some filters so it doesn't sound like it's a clean recording, it sounds like it's coming from across the room, and I can just bury it in the mix. And so if you hear some Uncle Seth tunes on the Just One Book podcast, you know I did it. But yeah, so it's amazing when the ambient noise becomes part of the atmosphere of the show. When you don't have that ambient noise, you don't have that atmosphere, the show, the whole dynamic changes.
Another thing is that, have you tried, I mean, in a very noisy situation like that, I'm asking because I did a lot of location sound recording for film.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, I would never record something like that to possibly help.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes, like in a film, you would record it dry and then
add the coffee shop ad.
You know, everybody walking around silent. But you know, in something like this, I think there are some filters that you can use, like noise.
Well, the noise filters, and I've played with them a little bit.
And then use the atmosphere to cover that up.
Yeah,
so the
but you have to be careful with noise reduction because it can degrade the sound.
Yeah, you run into, sometimes you'll end up with what comes across as being some phasing.
Yeah.
And other time, and don't use noise gates. Please don't use noise gates. There's one of the problems with noise gates is, and they come in handy. Okay, I got you in a second. Is the noise gate? What it does is when the noise floor drops below a certain threshold, so the ambient noise in the recording drops below a certain threshold, the signal gets cut off. And then when it comes up again, then it opens up the gate. So it's like a little gate. I'm not going to let sound through. Okay, I'm going to let sound through. Depends on how many people are pounding on the gate. The problem that you run into there is a couple things. One is it sucks the life out of the room, or sucks the air out of the room, so that you actually, when nobody's talking, it's dead silent. And then suddenly when people talk, there's a little bit of hustle and bustle, or maybe just the air moving around the room because you have fans on. But the real problem becomes is some people do it because there might be a fridge running in the background. Well, it's really strange when the fridge isn't there when you're not talking, and it is there when you are talking. So it's competing with you more when you use the noise gate than if you just let it run through. Hold on a second. I had it back.
Okay, so this all works great, and if you're just working with audio podcasts. What if you get in a video podcast and you've got your audio tied to your video sequence? You can't really cut and move things together in the same way.
You have to talk to Chris Brogan or the guys from the Galacticast. I would love to learn more about video, and I think that certain audio or video editing packages, because I've done some video stuff at home, allow you to separate the audio track and the video track.
Well, that's exactly what we do with our podcast, but I rip out the audio once I've done a rough edit, hand it off to my audio engineer, and she comes back with something. I don't know how she does it, right? Because she isn't free to sort of move these frames together. So, like, how do you go about cleaning up audio when you don't have the liberty to sort of move things together? Like, how do you drop things?
Yeah, when it comes to video, that whole thing scares me because that's a new thing in the mix. And it's funny, I can work well in audio, and I love working well in audio, but as soon as somebody puts a video in front of me, it's like I have to hold on to something. But yeah, Chris Brogan would be really good because he does a lot of video editing. It was over there.
Yeah, no, I think in Pro Tools you could fiddle a bit. You probably heard of Pro Tools on video. You can fiddle a bit with that, but I would say just cut away to a reaction shot.
Yeah.
The one thing that you could keep in mind too, if you're working on location, you can pick up some cheap shotgun mics rather than using lavaliers if you guys really wanted to get some quality sound on location. I mean, that gentleman there is a sound man from films, but if you're really serious about...
Well, we decided to do the coffee shop for a couple of reasons. One was that it's part of our daily routine, but also we thought the atmosphere, and actually what's amazing is the number of comments we've received saying, people who say they wake up in the morning, they go downstairs with their iPod, freshly loaded with the catch of the night, and they'll brew a pot of coffee, and they'll sit down at their table with their coffee and listen to our podcast while they drink their coffee in the morning, before the rest of the family's up. And so we get that a surprising amount. And I do other podcasts. I do, Canadian Podcast Buffet and Electric Sky. And to me, their sound quality is so key. And so, I mean, Steve Hardiman and Barbara Reed, the stuff I played there was recorded over Skype, and so the quality is a little bit iffy. But I really, that's where those are the podcasts that I'll fuss with the background noise.
Because if you had 3 mics rather than 2, of course.
You can cancel.
Yeah. You could mix it right on location. But
I was looking at shotgun mics for here to do some recording, because the other thing about shotgun mics when you're doing interviews is you don't, or I'm going to use this as an example, you don't have to do this. You can do this.
Or I could stand
right? So I can stand here and I can go, well, I mean, we'd be a little bit closer, but I go, Livin, how was your day today? And then I could just do this. And so the microphone's not in your face, and because we have eye contact, the microphone's out of the picture. I noticed last year some CBCers were doing that. Sue Campbell from Sounds Like Canada was interviewing people, and she had the microphone down here. And so the people who were talking to her, it was just a conversation.
See, that makes sense. That's a way to maintain the transparency.
Yeah, but I actually, yeah, it is expensive. Yeah, so it was good. So I was looking at options for getting a shotgun mic to come here with, and the entry level was $330 or $340, and then the next one up was like $450, and these were fairly. I mean, they were good. They're Audio Technicas and Rode, but they, I mean. They're not as directional. I mean, you go to $1,000 ones, and like I could aim it at, if I missed Ninja's mouth by a couple of inches, it would be that much more substantial audio signal loss.
Yeah.
They're amazingly directional.
Yeah. The average Sennheiser's about $5 grand.
Yeah. Yeah. I just podcast.
But it is true. The better the microphone, the better the quality.
Oh, absolutely.
Sorry.
No, that's good. You've been waiting, right?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious. Are you recording it, editing in MP3 or in WAV or any particular format?
I always, well, with the exception of this weekend, because there's so much recording going on, I always record WAV. I usually use 16-bit WAV because, especially with spoken word, there's not much advantage at 24-bit, especially when you're going to go to MP3 at the end result anyways. But when I've recorded some music stuff, I've actually done it at 24-bit, even though it goes down to MP3 afterwards, because I'll keep the original. Sorry, I think.
That was my question.
Oh, okay.
Recording, I mean, the MAudio that everybody has, pointed out, yeah, that one. It records direct to MP3, or has the capacity to, up to, I think, about like 360 or something kbps.
Yeah.
And
48 and 48-bit.
But if we're recording for a very long time, and recording massive panels at some point, like a conference last year, how restricted am I at that point for editing? And I mean, is it a mistake? Should I just get a massive, like, 4 gig flash drive or whatever? You know?
Well, when we did PAB last year, is that what you're talking about?
No, previous one.
Okay, well, PAB was all done on MP3s. So
yeah.
all those sessions, concert, everything was recorded in MP3 because there was so much to record. I mean, it depends what your end result is. If it's more just to document the event, which is what we were doing, and so people could hear the sessions and all that, then MP3 is sufficient. But yeah, I guess it really comes, like I always do WAV just because it gives me more flexibility in the editing, in the quality. And it gives me more, like when Cubase, for example, when I expand the waveform, you can see that the resolution. So as the waveform opens up, you see more and more of it, and more and more of it. And Cubase actually is known, because it's music, it's known for its resolution. Like you can see how far, that's the maximum I can go. And I don't know what portion of the waveform that represents, so I'll see if I can highlight it. So that's one sample. That's one little piece of audio. And I can't even see it when I shrink it. So the sample accuracy in Cubase is insane. And when I record WAV, I have far more flexibility, I have more samples to work with.
Is there a tutorial available for Cubase?
Yeah, there's actually, there's something called SexEd. SX, because it was originally Cubase SX, or at least the last release was SX. So they call it SexEd. And it's 3 DVDs. And I think I paid, I don't know, a couple $100 for the set. Yeah, well, I mean, when you're $800 software package, $200 tutorial.
I have it, but I don't know how to use it.
Yeah, Cubase is amazing. And you know what? I've had it for years, and I use it almost exclusively for podcasting now. And that's what I do. I record in here, I edit, I do a little bit of audio cleanup. I run it through some filters, and I publish. And I don't do music on here. It's crazy.
Hey, Mark, any reason to choose WAVE over AIFF?
Well, AIFF, you know what? I don't know enough about AIFF, to be honest. It just, WAVE is what I've been using for years. Maybe it's the devil I know, and so I've just stuck with it. So.
What do you think about using Levelator afterwards,
You know,
as opposed to like doing it amplified?
Yeah, I have, it's funny because I've, so many people have said, have you tried Levelator yet? And I keep meaning to, and I never have. And I would like to actually try it. I'd like to try it on something that I've actually already produced, and then something that I haven't produced, just to get the comparison.
For those of us who don't know what that is?
Oh, sorry, Levelator is a tool by Gigavox, so gigavox.com. And it's a group that produces IT conversations, and they've created a number of tools for their own use, which they've made available to the public. And what you can do is you install Levelator. Actually, I don't even think it's an install, just a standalone app, Java. Although I think they've moved away from Java now. I thought I heard. And what you do is you export your audio file into, I guess, WAV format, and you drag it onto the application. And what it does is it'll go through your application, and it'll go through your audio file, and it'll find areas that need to be boosted and areas that need to be compressed or limited. And it will level things off a bit. But I guess what makes Levelator so amazing is it actually does some advanced looking. So it goes, okay, it's going to be here, it's going to be down low, so I've got to raise it. So instead of just doing what most things do, which is bring it back up, is it'll actually do it'll use an algorithm to bring it up in a way that's not as shocking to the listener and bring it back down when things need to be brought back down.
With the new version too, because I noticed when I was doing it, like doors slamming in the background would be brought up.
Yeah, so
it was really annoying, so I went back to just doing it myself.
yeah, so what you run into is, and in the movie business, I mean, I'm sure this is the case. You have ambient noise, and you have things like doors shutting in the background, and you want them to sound like they're in the background. But if that's the only thing that's going on at the time, and it's below a certain level, well, Levelator doesn't know that it's supposed to be background noise, so it's going to bring it up.
There is this new program which is totally amazing in Adobe Premiere. When you use the Audition program, the whole series of programs, you can actually cut out telephone ringing in the background.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's just running really amazing filters.
Yeah. Well, it uses Illustrator to actually take it out in the waveform. I saw the
so it compares the waveforms.
You know, pardon me?
It'll compare the waveform, and then it'll figure out what it needs to remove.
It takes it right out of the middle.
That's amazing.
Anything like that.
That's amazing. That's Adobe
Audition.
Adobe Audition.
2.0.
But the other thing that you run into with, and I don't know if this is true of Levelator, but it's definitely true of compression and expansion, is if you do have background noise, the door slamming being one example, or just ambient noise of fans in the background, and somebody stops talking, then if you have your expander set a certain way, then that fan level is going to come up when somebody starts talking or stops talking. So that ambient noise will become that much more present during quiet times, or what should be quiet times.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask more about compression. Do you use any compression at all? Or?
I don't use a whole lot of compression. I use limiting because I don't want to expand my noise floor. If there's a situation where I really need to bring something up, I'll find that spot and I'll do it manually.
So do you limit at the recording though, or limit through the tool?
I always limit. I usually limit at about -1, -2 at a hard ceiling on my recording. And then when I actually do my final production, I'll run it through a maximizer, just as a way of bringing up some of the frequencies. I'll play with it a little bit because voice is a little bit different from music, and you want to have a nice balance. So when you do, like in audio mastering, for example, when a song is written and it's mixed, it always sounds really good. But it always sounds better when you send it off to Bob Ludwig, and he runs it through all his tools, and he sends it back to you with a bill for $10,000. So there's something to be said for that. There's something to be said for, having an audio level that's consistent in your show, that's also consistent to a certain degree with other shows. But most importantly, and I made the mistake this week, and I apologize if anybody here is a Canadian Podcast Buffet listener. I rushed the show out this week, and so when I did my I had 2 stings in there. If your ears are still ringing, I apologize. I put the stings in and I never moved the levels. So I just dropped the source audio in there and didn't play it. The rest of the show was pretty good though, wasn't it?
Mark from Rock and Roll Report. Do you record all your stuff in an external unit or directly into your
Most of what I do, I record here. It's an Edirol R1. There's the MAudio MicroTrack over here. There's the Edirol R9 over here. I'll try not to drop it. There's also the Zoom H4, and there's another one. All my field stuff, obviously, I use this. Some of my in-home stuff, I'll use this, just because with the exception of the buttons, I trust this unit, and it's designed to record. So as long as the battery doesn't run out, or if I have it plugged in, it's not a problem. But when I deal with recording Skype calls and stuff like that, I actually don't even use my Mac. I have a PC at home with the Delta 1010 card. And one of the great features of the Delta 1010 is the monitor mix can actually be a line in. So what I do with my Skype calls, and I'm actually going to blog about this because the tech, when I spoke to them at MIDI-Man, the company that makes it, he didn't even know that this was a possibility. He had never even considered it anyways. So what I do is I mute the monitor mix so it doesn't play out, and I put it into a channel in. So Skype is an input, an audio input from my computer, becomes a line in one of these tracks here. So in the case of Barbara Reed, let's look at it on the screen here. So that's my Skype track coming in on through the Delta 1010 on the monitor mix, and that's me going in on the mic line in on channel 1. So I'm able to separate them, so I can treat my, generally I don't have a whole lot to do with my source audio, but with the audio coming in through the Skype connection, I have to do a little bit of filtering just to get rid of some of the noise.
So that's feeding the Skype directly into your...
That's feeding Skype directly into that channel right there. And I managed to bypass it looping through by muting the monitor outputs.
Yeah, I've seen that works good.
Yeah, it's slick. And you know what? I have another card. I have a USB FireWire card for this system here, and unfortunately it's the same company, different driver set, so you don't have that feature. Hold on just a moment.
Rob Walsh just taught me a really cool trick, which is instead of trying to use Pamela or a hot recorder or something else for Skype calls, if you have one of those little iris, you run it through your mixer, and so the sound is coming in, and it captures it right out of the mixer as a line out, and then you're not trying to keep it back into the computer and dealing with the other issues, and it works out really well.
I'm doing the same thing, but I'm doing it internally. So what you can do is if you have a mixer with grouping, you can actually have Skype, because you end up going, it's really complicated. I'll see if I can say it quickly. You go microphone to mixer, mixer to computer, so that way your microphone is actually going into your computer so that your guest or the other person on Skype can hear you. And then you have to get that signal back out with Skype, but you want them to be on separate channels. So now you have to group your outputs so that you have Skype going out. So you want to group your outputs so you're not recording your mic. So Skype is coming out and you assign it to a different group, and then you assign the microphone from the mixer directly to the left channel of your iRiver input, and Skype coming back through the same mixer to the iRiver on the right channel. So now you're on one channel, the guest is on the other channel, and you end up with a similar situation here where Rob might be on this channel here, and his guest would be on this channel, and he can treat them separately. So if he's recording straight through his mixer, he'll have a nice clean sound, but his guest will be going through Skype, so you might have some computer buzzing or some computer noise coming through.
You explain all this very well.
Oh, thank you.
But from my side of it, I'm the content and the talent. I would love to do all this, but there's not time. So how do you find a
Ask
good...
her about how much time it takes.
Yeah, I know. I've done all the editing for film and video. But so what questions do you ask, or how do you tell when you're talking to a really able sound/editor rather than someone who just has so much jargon that they can cover up their lack of knowledge?
I don't know. I try to explain things in simple terms because things don't have to be complicated.
No.
One of the things that I think was instilled in me very early on is when you write an essay or when you write anything, write so that somebody understands you. And I actually dated somebody for a while who went to university when I was going to college. University's up here, college up here, we know. So when she wrote an essay and she handed it to me, and I handed it back to her and said, "It's a very interesting essay, but your prof is not going to like all these sources." Like she wrote the essay and then ran through the source. She didn't even know the word she was using, and she got all mad at me, and we didn't talk for 3 days. And then when her essay came back, she could show it to me, but she was out once. I happened to see it, and all the words that I told her to change were being redlined by the prof.
You're saying that if a sound person, an editor can't make it
I would think so. And we use metaphors to describe what it is that we're trying to achieve too. Right? Trying to describe things in a way. Somebody came up to me once and asked me to record something. I can't even remember what the situation was. I can't remember the term they used, but I asked her what kind of performance, what kind of vocal performance she wanted. It was Sage from Freaking Nomads, and she described a scene as opposed to describing how my character was supposed to be saying it. She described a feeling almost, but not a feeling like she described in terms of you feel this. She just described something I was looking at. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So I think you need to be able to communicate that on many levels. I hope it's helpful. It's kind of wishy-washy.
Thank you, Mark.